For it is by grace you are saved through faith, not of yourselves, but it is a gift of God. Ephesians 2:8. Welcome to Grace Bond Ministries. Hey everybody, welcome. Tell me it's being recorded. Hey everybody, Jonathan here from Grace Bond Ministries. Very excited about this podcast today and reviewing Beth. Beth has Beth does a lot of work with grief counseling, and she has a podcast called Daughters Without Moms and a website called yourgriefjourney.com. And what we're going to do this morning is we're going to take a look at what she does and what kind of started that and where her passion comes from and things like that. And then at the end, we're going to check out the website a little bit. She's going to share her screen and she's going to show us around her website a little bit. So Beth, if you would, just go ahead and introduce yourself and we'll go ahead and get started.
Sure. Thanks for having me today, Jonathan. I appreciate it. And if you didn't know, Jonathan and I met because he shared on my podcast, the Daughters Without Moms podcast. So you can go back and listen to that. He was episode number 30. So, and he was the fourth sibling in his family to share his story. So like Jonathan said, I have a podcast called Daughters Without Moms, excuse me, but it's obviously not just Daughters Without Moms because he is a son without a mom. I also have interviewed a few other people who just have stories of grief or hope or resilience. So the podcast in general is just a place for people to either share their stories of their grief journey and or stories of hope and resilience and grace. So I started that in January. I came into this work last year because with the pandemic and everything, just kind of caused me to have I don't know if it's a midlife crisis or a shift in my journey. But I mean, actually it started in January because I lost my sister after an almost 10-year battle with cancer and in January of 2020. And then I turned 50 basically the weekend that the country shut down and had lots of time to be at home and think and process my own grief and just realize that I don't feel like we as a culture do a really good job of supporting people in their grief. Because there is no right way to support anybody in the grief, but it's also not a problem to be fixed. Like, the people aren't going to come back. It's not something that's going to go away. So it's more of just, I've learned for myself of just providing space and just listening and being with people in their journey instead of trying to fix it or go through those 6 stages of grief or something like that. So that's what started it. And then I did a program that to kind of help me with this online community because I wasn't really good at it. And so I started an Instagram group and a Facebook group and have written some programs. And I'm in Pennsylvania. I have 3 almost all adult children, 23, 20, and 18. Been married for 25 years this year. So lots to be thankful for.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Like Beth and I have talked about multiple times now, there is this idea in the church that that mental wellness and Christianity don't mix. That basically, and actually, historically, a lot of people just assume that if you had some kind of mental illness, that it had something to do with demon possession or something of that sort. Especially for some of the more serious things like schizophrenia and stuff like that. That's kind of the idea, and schizophrenia may not be the best example, but definitely we're talking about grief, and when you lose somebody, a lot of people think if you'll just read the scriptures and just meditate on the scriptures that it'll heal everything. And I think that would definitely be part of something I would share with somebody is, hey, why don't you get a little closer to Jesus and read the scriptures and be closer to God? Because, I mean, if there's anybody who understands your situation more than anybody else in this world, it'd be God. And so I would suggest that. But I also would suggest things that are see, this is where I kind of differ with a lot of Christians is how God revealed things to us. And I think even because I have a lot of friends and people who are strong Christian people who are Christian psychologists and psychiatrists, and and they are, and what you see is that God has revealed to humankind uh, uh, almost people. This is where people start getting nervous with me. Is, I say he revealed apart from the Bible, but he revealed things to us, and I think psychologists have picked up on those things that God has revealed that are just really what it is it's more that they're discovered. They're natural things that God created that we have discovered and God has taught us. And so then when we get to dealing with grief journeys, then we can use those tools that God has given us. So that's why I don't say that these things come from, wherever. I say these things still come from God. Well, I think that's pretty important. So anyways, now that I've went on my rant, hopefully, I'm hoping that'll kind of get some, ruffle. That's my kind of. I hate to say that, but one of my goals is to ruffle feathers, so that way people will start asking questions and stuff. It's like, well, you can,
Yeah.
We'll have a little conversation and see where.
Right. Well, and can I say, so I was 13 when I lost my mom, and the only people who had ever taken me to church was my grandparents, and they threw my sister and I out of their house while my mom was laying in a hospital bed dying. So for like 20 years, I was mad at God because I held my grandparents responsible. I held God responsible for my grandparents' actions. Now, granted, I was also 13. It's not really easy to process things when you're 13. And so as I got older and opened my heart a little bit more and was able to, receive the grace that was available for me through God and not from, what my grandparents' actions were, it became a little easier to be able to open up my heart again. But I think if people have had a significant loss also at a young age, so I thought for a long time, like, why was I punished? Because I prayed for my mom to get well. I prayed for her not to die. And why were my prayers not answered? And so then in a 13-year-old mind, it's like, so then why was I punished? Because that's what I felt like. And then people said things like, well, everything happens for a reason and God has a plan and he must have needed her more than you. And those were all things that just when you're in the depth of grief, it's just like putting a knife in your back. I did a whole podcast on those. Those are called platitudes. I didn't know they actually had a name. But those things that people say that are those natural responses, I think those commonly used phrases in our culture that, are supposed to be empathetic, sympathetic, whatever you want to call it, are not received that way. So, and then you're in your own little chasm of your grief and your isolation and you're lonely because, your mom is gone or whoever you've lost. But that can be a big, like, I want to say to anybody who's listening to this, that if you have had something that put up a wall between you and your spiritual journey, like, give it time. Don't write it off completely. It took me 20 years. So there's, but in the end, I found the only thing that will really help fill the holes of being a human is God, So we can try food, we can try shopping, we can try, all the things that we try to do to fill our lives to make them feel complete. And it's taken me a long time, but I realize, when all else fails, he's the one that I can rely on. So, but it took me a long time to be able to trust again. And, I wasn't brought up in church, and I had this vision of like a condemning God, the judging, condemning God. And after lots of talks with people at the church where I'm a member, and I did finally become baptized when I was 33, that I realized, the God that I believe in is a loving God. So that, he didn't cause my mom to die, that he gave us freedom to make choices as human beings when he created Adam and Eve and gave us choices to be able to make. But that he's there with you through all the stuff that life throws at you, the good and the bad.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
that's
that's
where
awesome.
I've
Yeah. And I told you too, I was, when my mom passed away, I wasn't one that was just, I don't know, I guess I probably was angry at God a little bit, but most of mine was dealing with doubts. And that's why I have such a passion for apologetics, because I think I don't know if I could say I have a perfect answer, but I have some satisfactory answers, or some satisfactory steps towards those answers, I guess I should say, for some of that stuff. But but it is, and as a minister, they actually train us that, uh, when we're talking to people about their grief journey, that, uh, those people aren't going to hardly anybody's actually going to remember what you say, unless you say something bad. uh, but they're going to remember, that you were there, you cared about them, and that kind of thing. Because I remember, in my first church I was a pastor at in Georgia, a random guy shows up to church on the Sunday I was out, and he said, I need prayer for my wife and my son. He's dying. My wife's dying. And we thought he was just there for money. That was kind of our first assumption, because he asked for money. And long story short, his son ended up dying. And I found out when the funeral was, showed up at the funeral. And as soon as he found out who I was, then he started asking me questions. Why would God take my son away? And that kind of thing. It was at the viewing of the funeral. But I just remember that was one of the mistakes I made, though. I mean, it's the only time I ever saw this guy. I never saw him again. But I know one of the mistakes I made is trying to answer those questions. This is when I first started in apologetics and stuff, and I was trying to answer those questions, and there was nothing I could have said that would have convinced him that it was reasonable that his son was dead. And I think that's important, that like you said, that God is really there for, a lot of times he's there for comfort. He's there for comfort, and he does have a plan. He does have an ultimate plan. And even in death, we see the necessity for Jesus Christ, and for his return, and it gives us hope for his return, and hope for the reunion in heaven, and that kind of thing. But it's really cool, though. It's really cool how God does interact with grief journeys, and various ways and things.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so now let's talk about your podcast, because here's my hope for anybody listening to this, is that if you are looking for help, this could be one of your options, to seek help, and from a great Christian person. So let me see here, because we're going to look at your website here in a second, but so you kind of talked about this a little bit, but really, what's your passion for doing the podcast? I mean, I know you talked about it. It started in January after your sister died, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what brings about your passion for the individuals that you work with?
I think how it started was I did a couple focus groups and talked to some daughters without moms, and tried to see what people's needs were, and what they were looking for. And I think the podcast is just a place for you to be heard if you are comfortable with sharing your story. I mean, Jonathan, you did it. I literally mute myself and I just let people share their story of either losing their mom, or losing their dad, or losing their sister. I've lost all three. So even though it's called Daughters Without Moms, it could be daughters without dads, sisters without sisters. And so I've had several people who, when we get to the end of the podcast and then I stop recording and we kind of do a little offline, like we, go through how it went, they say, I realize I've never fully told that story from beginning to end because either we weren't allowed to talk about mom after she died, or just never had the opportunity. Excuse me. So I think it's just providing that space for people to be heard, if they feel like they want to share their stories. And then the connection that I hear from people when they listen to other people's stories. Like, I have one of my most faithful listeners is a farmer who lives about 30 minutes away. His wife is one of my good friends, and he listens to it every week. And I think he said, it's just the humanity. Like, he's like, I just love hearing people's stories. I love hearing about their journeys. And it's just humanity is what it is. So I had our retired police chief share about losing his wife to ALS. I did like a caregiver identity loss with a couple of women that I've interviewed. So it's just and the platitudes one that I did with talking about those sayings that people say. It's about awareness. sharing things, sharing the journeys, because I don't think that there's any right way to grieve. I think just getting as much out there possible for other people to listen to and connect. If one person listens to the podcast and feels like doesn't feel alone anymore, then I feel like that's one of my main goals.
Yeah.
That they just don't feel alone.
And I know that worked for my siblings and I, because after every podcast, whoever was up that week, we all texted one another and gave our thoughts and all that stuff. I actually got a few texts saying from my siblings saying for some reason mine was the most emotional one for them.
Interesting.
For some reason, I'm pretty sure that was my older siblings, because I think they were just emotional because they didn't check on me. I talked about people not checking on me and that kind of thing. Yeah. But it was pretty cool, and we're actually planning on doing a Zoom call like this, so hopefully in the future, sometime soon, and get all of us on here and go through the events together. That'd be awesome.
That would be awesome. Good for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know one thing. I'll never forget this, and and it doesn't just apply to siblings, but to people in general. When you're going through grief, to not go through it alone. There was a lady. I was at a wedding with one of my wife's friends, and this teacher come up to us and asked about my mom or something. She didn't know anything, and I said, actually, my mom passed away. And she's like, oh, the next question she said was, do you have siblings? And I said, yeah, I've got 3 siblings. And she said, that's the one thing I wish I had when my parents passed away, was siblings, and somebody that was going through that with me. So I'll never forget that. And
yeah.
So what about the website? How long has the website been going that you run?
So I kind of started all this stuff in the fall, but I was still working part-time at my at my job. And I gave my notice there and finished in December. And so luckily I have a very supportive husband who said, yeah, let's do this for a year. You do your thing, put it out there, see what happens. And so maybe the website started in November or December. But I've done it all myself so far. So the learning curve has been significant, but I love to learn. So Google is my friend.
Yeah, right. Anybody's watched this podcast, I'm definitely in some learning phases. I found a new software for recording live, and but it's not very smooth yet. But so you can see some of my transitions and stuff, and when you're live, there's nothing you can really do about it. So
right.
But also gives me an excuse to be lazy and not edit it either. So.
Well, you know what? One of the things I learned from that program I did in the fall was that it's okay to be a C student. Messy action is better than no action.
All right.
So we're showing up, Jonathan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is interesting, especially, in the year we've had people quarantine and stuff like that. And I haven't heard any statistics. I don't know if you have, but I would imagine that podcast and YouTube and that kind of thing is probably growing a lot in the last year or so, with people being at home on the internet more.
I've heard in some ways it has grown, but that listening has declined because people aren't commuting. People weren't, like a lot of people would listen to it in their cars on their way to work. And while they weren't commuting, they weren't listening. So both sides of the spectrum. Yeah. Huh. Yeah.
So, so let me ask you this one last question, and then we'll take a look at the website, if that's all right with you.
Sure.
Question 5 there. What's some advice that you would give people going through grief, and also, what about ones that aren't in the grief, aren't grieving right now, but are there ways they can prepare, or what's some things that you've learned over doing this that you could share with people?
Mm-hmm. I think to the people who are going through grief, I think just to know that that there's no right way to do it, that just like every single person is individual, their grief journeys are individual. But I think the most important thing is to allow yourself to feel it, to not push it away or ignore it, or, if you're sad, it's okay to be sad. And also to realize that sometimes you can have two emotions at the exact same time. I feel like I was kind of brought up like either you're happy or sad, but you can feel joy and loneliness all at the same time, because like my niece is here, and this week was the 1.5 year anniversary of my sister's passing. And so we went and we were out and about, and my sister's favorite flower was sunflowers. And so we were at Trader Joe's and they had some sunflowers. I was like, let's get them for Amy. And so in that moment, it's the joy of saying, we're recognizing and missing her and loving her and are thankful for these beautiful sunflowers. But there's, the pain of that she's not here with us to enjoy it. But I think I've always felt like you could only have one or the other. You couldn't have both at the same time, but that's not true. You can most certainly feel joy and sadness all at the same time. And especially after loss, a lot of those events will bring up both emotions at the same time. And just, give yourself time and space. And like I've said, I don't think there's any right way to grieve. I think those like 6 stages of grief are correct, but I don't think that you go through them in any certain order and then are done. I don't think you get over grief. So one of my things on the website when we get to that is about learning how to grow with your grief, because it's not going to go away, and also you're not the same person you were before, because you couldn't possibly be, because a portion of your life has changed and it's not going to go back to that way. So this thing about, people talk about like getting back to normal and things like that. Well, there is no normal anymore. When your mom is gone and your dad is gone or your sister is gone, things are different. And you're different because of the impact that the loss has had on you. So, no real concrete stuff except for just to allow yourself to feel it, to name it. And like, from your podcast where you said, get help, talk to others, find somebody who is a trusting friend that you can share your stuff with. And, if somebody is not just listening, so my husband is great. And, like I said, we've been married for 25 years and I lost my mom before I met him, but then my dad passed in 2018 and then my sister in 2020. And over the years, I've told him like sometimes I need to just tell you things and I don't need you to fix it, which I think is like the male standard thing, is to try to fix things when there's a problem, right? And so if I'm telling him I'm sad or this and that, I'm like, sometimes I just want you to listen and I don't need you to fix it. I just want you to listen. And he's actually gotten it. Like sometimes I can see, like I be having a time where I'm missing my sister or something like that. And I'm telling him about it and I'm usually crying or something. I can literally see like the smoke coming out of his head because he's trying to stop those gears, from going to stop. Okay, don't say it. Just listen. Don't say it.
Yeah.
And so but he wouldn't have learned that if I hadn't, been vulnerable and said, this is what I need. So you've got to, find a safe place where you can share your grief and your truth. Trying to cover it up and making everything sugar and spice and everything nice is not, what you need. You need to be able to speak how you're feeling and just have it be received without trying to be fixed. And I was telling you before we started recording, like that was one of the problems that I had with church for about 20 years. But was that we, try to show up on Sunday morning with, everybody's dressed nice and their hair's combed and like, you've got it all together. And if any place it should be that we should just be like, oh my gosh, I'm so broken and I need help. And this is going wrong and that's going wrong. I think the tides are turning a little bit with that. Like you and I have talked about that it's becoming more normal to be able to talk about the hard stuff. But I think that is a place where we could, possibly do a little bit better of supporting people when they are in those deep, hard moments that are hard to talk about because there is no answer and there is no, way to make it right. And then so others who are not going through it. So do you mean like people who are supporting others that are going through grief, or just like?
I was more, that'd be good too, but I was more thinking about And this is, this is a lot of what I do is trying to prepare people because, that these things are coming in your life. It's a
Mm,
scary thing to think about. And we all know that they're coming though. It's like me, we lost our mom, but we still got grandparents and aunts and uncles and our dad, I mean, siblings. I mean, you never know what's going to come, so
mhm.
what would you suggest for people so that, at least at least they're prepared, like
Mhm.
I would talk about, we already talked about this before, but and really maybe it overlaps a little bit, the same stuff that you would do while you're grieving. If you know that stuff before you're grieving, then that way when you're grieving, that's the stuff you need to try to do and reach out to do and reach out for somebody that you can talk to and that kind of thing. Uh,
Yeah. I guess what some of the things you could do. So these are the things that I've learned from losing my mom when I was 13. I tell people how I feel about them. Like my oldest daughter just turned 23, and I wrote her this whole letter about how our relationship is transitioning to, an adult relationship. Like I'll always be her mom, but I don't need to, like, I want to respect her being an adult and how our relationship is going to change based on that. And I always will tell people what they mean to me and that I love them. And I think probably for me, a lot of that is because like I don't have anybody to share stories of like from when I was a kid anymore because both of my parents are gone. My only sibling is gone. I have a couple of aunts and an uncle that are still around, but I don't see them very often. So I guess maybe, think about the things that are important to you and like what your legacy would be. And there's this great online tool called Storyworth that I have both of sets of grandparents doing this year, where they get sent a question every week and the people submit their answers. And at the end of the year, you get a book. So it's kind of like, the story of grandmom and pop kind of thing. So I guess I would say, whatever the kind of things are that are meaningful to you, maybe for some people it's art, maybe for some people it's music. I think for your brother Raymond, who was a music kind of guy, where that was his thing. Think about how those things could be beneficial to your journey before the journey gets to that point. You know, like I think we spend a lot of time like, oh, I'll just wait till I'm 10 pounds lighter, or I'm, have 10,000 more dollars, or I'm in the McMansion kind of thing. No, do it now. Do what you need to do now. Say the words that you need to say now. I love music too. I'm a John Mayer, say what you need to say kind of thing. Um, All You Need Is Love is my other one from the Beatles. But, I think you don't wait to be you or do you. You know, if you haven't had anything in your life that shows you that life is short, it'll be too late if you wait. And I've had a lot of things that have told me that life is too short. So I think that's kind of what, was the impetus that got me into this journey of what I'm doing now.
this is a kind of an off-topic question popped in my head though. Uh, I wonder, and I'm thinking about people I've talked with too, but I'm wondering, have you seen that a lot with people that you talk to that it seems like regret is the biggest thing that's hindering their grief journey.
Yeah, there is a lot of that. And there's something about the, so you don't have a child yet, but I know you have one on the way. Girls and moms, and usually in like the early sometime teenage years, tend to go through this period of tension. And at several of the women that I've interviewed, if their mom like passed while they were still young, they carry around a lot of guilt about, I should have done this, or I should have been a nicer teenager. I wish I wouldn't have fought with her so much. Um, so yeah, I would totally agree that I think that the regret and the guilt is something that can be carried around for a long time. And the thing that I can think of, the one girl specifically, Jamie. I said, you can't judge your 13-year-old self with your 32-year-old brain. When you're 32 years old and you're looking back at what happened when you were 13, you have a different set of circumstances and a different, knowledge and different life events that have shaped who you are versus when you were 13 and just dealing with losing a mom when you're 13 is a huge, huge, devastating, traumatic event. So you can't look back on that. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, you can't judge
Hmm.
yourself by your old brain, with your newer, older brain back to what you did when you were 13, because it's not fair. And most of us were doing the best we could. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's that's what I was gonna say too. Is I was thinking about all the people I've talked to, and and they've lost a loved one or something, and especially like you were talking about with the teenagers. I mean, they just they assume that, especially, I think a lot of people do this though, that the very last thing they said is what that person was going to remember for all of eternity or something.
Yeah.
And I thought about that for a long time, because I remember just the Sunday before my mom died, before she went to the hospital, she had asked me to get her a water, go get her some water from the church fountain, and I'm like, I'm not doing that. That's stupid or something. And and I highly doubt, though, throughout that last week of her life, she really cared if I got her water or not, or I'm sure she's probably not dwelling on that now. So it's just crazy, the kinds of thoughts that pop into our head that are just, they're just tearing us apart, and it's not even that big of a deal. But I think about that a lot, though, with helping people, prepare for that kind of thing, and and I'm not one to, I'm not really saying that the verbatim answer is in Scripture, but when you read Scripture and you follow the things of Scripture, like when you love other people, you treat other people with respect, uh, and that kind of thing. If you follow those kinds of things, and you treat people well, you have a good integrity with people, then no matter what happens, you'll know that you were doing the right thing to the best of your ability. Nobody's perfect, but you're doing the best of your ability. And that's important, especially for like ministers and counselors and that kind of thing, because you know how it is. You're talking to somebody and you're like, oh man, I hope I said the right thing, you know.
Yeah.
But you know that you tried, and that you did it from a good spot in your heart and that kind of thing. And as long as the integrity is strong, then the
That's
rest
what
of
I
it
was.
can, yeah, the rest of it can, it would be a lot easier to deal with.
I remember you saying that in my pot, and when I interviewed you, you said, I've learned how to live in my integrity. And I think that if you can stand in that and go to bed each night with a clear conscience, it's the best we can strive for.
Yeah,
We're not perfect and we are going to make mistakes, but if we're trying to operate out of a place of best intention, then, we're doing the best we can.
yeah, right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes that takes some apologies.
It does. It
Ask my
does.
older sister about that one. We had a heck of a yelling match, but
uh,
like I said, if like the scriptures say, if you got a problem like that, and you go and you deal with the situation one on one, or ask for help if you need it, and
yeah.
you move forward.
And at worst, you agree to disagree, but at least
Yeah,
I feel like when you don't voice and get those things out into the open, when you hold them inside and we all make up those stories in our head, and then we can find what we want to see, right? Like if you and Danielle had something happen and and you don't talk about it, like the next time you would see her, interact with her, you can make that stuff up because you can find what you're looking for, and then it just
yeah,
festers and snowballs and turns into something way more than it should, even though it's take that 5-10 minutes to have the hard conversation, but then it's out in the open. And then if you get to the end and you're the same place you were, you say, well, I guess we can agree to disagree and still
yeah.
love and respect each other.
And specifically with grief, I mean, I'm sure my sister wouldn't mind sharing this, but when my mom died, my sister, she was the older sister, and so she assumed that she had to take on the mother role for everybody, and and a month or 2 months after my mom passed away, I didn't need anybody taking on that role. But did we ever sit around and talk about it? No, she would try to be the mother, I would get angry, or my brother would get angry, my little sister, or whatever, and I don't remember my little sister getting angry about it, but we just get angry, but we would never talk about it,
Yeah.
and cause all kinds of problems.
And that's such a natural thing that happens too. Everybody
Yeah,
tries to fill that missing role, but if you actually talked about it with each other, you would probably say, "Oh no, I don't need you to do that. Thanks,"
yeah,
which
right.
would relieve the stress on both of you.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
All right. That's good stuff. So now let's go over to the website. Here, I'll pause the. I'm gonna pause the live stream real quick, and well, I'm not live streaming, but I'll pause the recording and we get on there. Okay, so we're on Beth's website here. This is called yourgriefjourney.com. Yep. And she's going to walk through some things and about what's on here and what things are on here for you to check out.
Yeah. So yes, so your grief journey, living with grief and reclaiming yourself. That's kind of the part I talked about that your identity changes after loss because you're not the same person. So this is just, kind of goes through my beliefs about grief, which I think I've probably made pretty apparent in how you and I have been talking. And here, we didn't talk about this a lot. You talked about regret, but I believe shame also can be a big part of a grief journey when you are not given the right proper space to be able to share your thoughts and your grief and stuff. So I did write a program called Permission to Grieve and Permission to Grow. And I have all these awesome GR words that I love: using grace, grit, and gratitude to grow with grief. And so, like it says, they're designed to give you space to acknowledge your loss in a safe place, learn tools to live with grief, and then finish with that deeper understanding of who you are now that your whole normal has changed. So the first program is called Permission 1, and that's the Permission to Grieve part. And it's for 6 weeks. We meet once a week online over Zoom. And then I assign the people that are part of the program into accountability groups, and they meet a few days later and go over their homework. There is assignments every week, just because I'm an action-oriented kind of person. I like to put the things into action. So they meet once a week with their accountability group to share their homework and go over their homework. It's like 3 to 4 people per group, so that there's enough time for people to do that. And so there's an outline of what's included in it. And then Permission 2 would be permission to grow. And that's where we talk about naming, like your hooks and triggers and your limiting beliefs and things like that. And then developing your own plan of action on how to grow with your grief. Because like I said, it's not going to go away. It's going to come back. Those waves and ebbs and flows of the tides of grief are going to continue to be a part of your life. So it's more of identifying, how do you know when it's showing up? And if you have like a specific set of tools that you can reach for to try to deal with your grief. So, and then I, kind of talked about why this program would be applicable for anyone. And so then I've just started offering this one-to-one coaching too. Like, I like group settings because, my mom's been gone for 38 years. So it's not difficult for me to talk about it and to share the journey, but there's been people who have requested doing one-to-one coaching. So the 6-week program is literally the same content, but just done on a one-to-one basis. And then the 3-month program is the same thing with the 6 weeks of content, but in between each week of content, we'd also meet and we would do the implementation part together, live and over Zoom. So it's more of having a deeper sense of accountability with the program too. So also, you can choose just a single session coaching if you would like to do one of the areas like the grief or the grid or I think I have them, those 3-4 aspects up there. So somebody could choose to just do one of those if they would like. And then there's testimonials from people who have finished the program and, what their takeaways were from the program and what they liked about it. So at the bottom here, it says, click here to schedule a connection call. I absolutely am happy to jump on the phone with anybody who would just like to connect and talk and ask any questions about it and see if there's to see if there's a connection. If you're going to work with somebody, that you need to feel comfortable and that you have a connection with someone. So that's something that I offer. And so I am not a licensed therapist or counselor. I consider myself more of a grief coach. Just using all of the material that I've curated over the years that has worked for me over the past 30 plus years. I mean, I've really been more active in this in the past probably 12 or so years. The job that I worked in before was for a family business consulting firm and was part of a women's leadership lab. And so lots of tools and things I learned from working at that firm have helped me in my grief journey. So that just gives some information about me. And then there's links to the podcast on here. So I think the podcast is a good place to start if anybody's listening to this and they think they're interested or, want to kind of see a little bit more of what it's about. Listen to a couple of the podcasts. Jonathan's is there, the most recent, number 30, and then his sister's 29. And I think I have all the links to all your siblings in the notes for your podcast. So, and then I just have, done a few little blogs on some ideas and things that have resonated with me. So that's another way that you could go on there and read some things that I've written to see, kind of what my thoughts are and what my journey has been. So.
All right, that's awesome. Now, are you charging for any of this?
Yes, okay. I am. Mm-hmm. I think there's a link to, on the, let's see. I'm in the midst of updating everything here because I just added the 6-week, the coaching thing. So I hope, yeah. 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 So the 6-week program is $1,000.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's links on there that if somebody would want to get more information, if they follow the link, it'll take them to more details about what's included in the program.
All right, cool. So that is that's yourgriefjourney.com.
Yeah.
I think it's really awesome what Beth's doing, and getting people to really. I'm sure you probably run into a lot of people. I've met people that probably have lost a loved one, 20, 30 years ago, and still haven't grieved at all.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you run into that a lot, and so that's cool that you're getting people to open up and start dealing with these things and thinking about these things. It's pretty cool work, and I also know it's very rewarding work. You see somebody that I've talked to people ready to kill themselves one day, and the next day walk around with a smile on their face. It's an awesome feeling seeing that. All right, you have any final thoughts you'd like to add?
No, I mean, I guess the one thing I was thinking about, is just, so, my mom has been gone for 38 years and they say that you can teach from a scar, but not from a wound. So, that's one thing to think about too on the timelines of your grief journey. If your loss, like my sister is still an open wound for me. It's just been 1.5 years and I can talk about it, but I miss her so much that it's not as easy for me to look at it from a kind of, third party perspective. Whereas my mom's been gone for more years than I knew her. I had 13 years with her and 38 years without her. So just to think about that too, when you hear other people talking about their grief, it also depends on your timeline and how your loss happened. And, there's just all kinds of things that go into it. But it's more of a scar for me with my mom at this point. So it's easier for me to talk about, but that doesn't mean that it's easy for everybody to talk about. And that's okay. That's okay. But I did realize, so losing my sister made me go back to process my mom because I never really did. We never really did, You were 13, we got thrown into cleaning out the house and going back to school. I think I remember Rebecca talking about that. You go back to school and it's not something that everybody talks about when you're 13 years old because nobody really gets it and it's uncomfortable. So I did go back to my mom, 37 years later. So
one of my favorite things in high school was when people didn't know my mom died, and they would make a "yo mama" joke, and then when I told them my mom died, they had no idea how to respond, and so I just kind of started using it as like a game and to mess with them, and their "yo mama" joke didn't make it as far as my that's for sure.
I bet.
All right, well. Thank you for being on the podcast, and thank you all for watching. I hope you find this beneficial, and it'd be awesome if anybody wants to reach out to Beth and be on her podcast and share your journey, or be a part of the program, the permission program. and just look into some of that stuff, or check out her blogs and all that kind of thing. Because if you watch Grace Bond Ministries, that's not my main thing here, but definitely something I'll talk about off and on. But Beth's doing some great work, and I can at least say for my family that she's brought us closer together just by letting us share our stories. So
Awesome.
yeah, so it's some awesome stuff happening.
Thanks, Jonathan. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. All right, we'll see you on the next one.